Hi, everybody. It's Aaron and Samuel. We are coming to you with some information on just a general timeline for 2023, some parallels. So he's with me, and thank you, Samuel, for coming on. And Samuel's a great resource. He's got a lot of information. My general thoughts this year, just in general for Rapture watching and eschatology and things of that nature, is I'm just trying to take just a small step back to see the larger picture, and we're just trying to pin down, well, we're trying to sort of pin down a year, and right now we're just looking at the possibility of 2023 being the year of our departure, but then looking a bit broader and saying, okay, when is this tribulation going to take place? When's day one of tribulation? I believe that there is a rapture gap. Samuel does too. And so if we can kind of pinpoint when tribulation might start based on biblical history and the books of the Bible, of course, and bouncing to and fro, then we might be able to figure out our departure. My intent really isn't just to figure out the rapture date, but if we are educated and confident in our eschatology and our studies, then it's a lot easier to go out and win people to Christ based on some knowledge as well, saying, you know what, Jesus is coming soon, but this is the reason why. And so studying inspires growth in the community of Christ in terms of winning people to Christ and explaining why we're close. And so it's not so much just trying to figure out the rapture date for no reason. It's trying to say, you know what, if Jesus is really this close, that means we've got work to do from a ministry standpoint. So with that being said, I'll pass it over to Samuel, but of course, one more thing, we're in the month of we're in the 10th month, which is the month of Esther.
Yeah, Tevet.
Tevet, which is it's a great option for rapture. Where then there's Purim, that's another big one, and then there's the whole Passover and the spring feast. Those are big options. Then there's second Passover. Then there's the Pentecost season, and so there's always a reason for a rapture. There's always a high and low watch times. But right now we're more so focused on just the general year, if we could even pin that down. So anyway, so we'll give it over to Samuel, and he'll do most of the talking, and I'll interject if I have any questions or if I want to really highlight something that he said. So yeah, go ahead, Samuel.
All right. Thanks for having me, Aaron, on your show.
No problem. Thank you.
Oh, always cool. All right. Yeah, before I start, I just want to make a few disclaimers, a few statements before I begin. And that is, first of all, take everything with a grain of salt. That's the most important. And most of the prophetic numbers are just used for a parallel setup, okay? Remember that. It's just a parallel setup. They are not the actual fulfillment of the sacred prophecies. Then I won't present any specific days, weeks, or months, only hinting towards a potential year. Then nobody knows the hour, the day, the week, the month, and the year of the rapture and the second coming, but we do know the century, so hooray, I guess.
Yeah.
This is just for all those who want to write in the comment section that no one knows the day and the hour. You don't need to write that in the comment section because I already wrote it for you. Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Well done.
So when you don't like math patterns, then you don't need to watch the following content. What follows are just some interesting ideas to think about. It's all just for fun. Now it's realistic that the rapture happens somewhere within the next 10 years. Yeah, plus minus. I won't promise or guarantee anything regarding a specific rapture timing. 2023 can fly by just like 2020, 2021, and 2022. Okay.
That's right. That's all good. Thank you, Samuel. That's a really balanced way of looking. And of course, there will be a handful of people watching this video going, "What is he talking about?" Like, we're all hoping we get out of here right now. Believe me, Samuel and I both want to go today. So
Yeah, absolutely.
right now we're trying to look at 23. But yeah, go ahead, Samuel.
Absolutely. Alrighty then. So what is the first special thing about 2023? Well, the first reason why 2023 is significant is because of the Abraham parallel. And I know that most of you already know about the Abraham parallel. Most of you have already heard about it. I know Watchman Adam has already made a big video on this topic. But basically, for all those who still don't have a clue what the Abraham parallel is, it's just basically when you add up all the genealogies from Adam to Terah all the way to Abraham, you come to the fascinating conclusion that Abraham was born in 1948 and he entered the promised land in the year 2023, right? So 130 plus 105 plus 90, 70, 65, 162, 65, 187, 182, 502, 135, 30, 40, 34, 30, 32, 30, 29, 70, 75 equals 2023.
So this is really an exciting fact. Now, are we starting from Adam's birth? Is that where we're starting from?
Well, there are different opinions on when exactly Adam's aging took place. Some say that it began at, well, the fall of man, right? The sin, the first sin in the Garden of Eden. And some say it literally began when Adam was created on day 6. To me, it doesn't really matter. I'm not too dogmatic about it. I mean, the aging could have began, when Adam sinned in the garden, or it could have began on day 6 when Adam was literally created. But yeah.
Okay. So it's one of the two that we're starting from.
Yeah, opinions vary.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, when you add up all the numbers, you come to the conclusion that he was born in 1948 and he entered the promised land in 2023. So that's one fascinating thing.
Yeah, that's super fun.
Super fun. Okay. All right, let's go to the next chart. So this one is a biggie. I know there's a ton of stuff here, but I'll just go one by one. First of all, the first parallel we see here is Daniel's 70th week, the 2,520 days, the day for a year theory, right? This goes to the midpoint, to the end.
And when he said the day for year theory, just so a lot, if you're new, we believe that the tribulation is 2,520 days, which would be 7 prophetic years. That's 360 times 7, and so that's where he's coming up with that number.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, just 7 prophetic years. That's correct. Now, how do I come up with the date of AD 688? Where do I get that date from? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I got that from here. All right, when you go to the Wikipedia page of Dome of the Rock, when you look all down here, underneath the map, you see here architecture. Down here is the date, and it says built between 688 and 692 AD. All right, so that means 688 was the commencement year. All right, 688 was the commencement year of the Dome of the Rock. Now all we have to do is minus 1260 years, and we can also plus 1260 years, and we can just see where that gets us, right?
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, so we have a nice parallel with the year count, 2,520 days, from Ezekiel's vision all the way to Israel's birthday.
That's correct. Exactly. So what's so special about 573 BC? What happened there? Well, first of all, that was Ezekiel's vision of the millennial temple, right? When you read Ezekiel chapter 40 all the way to chapter 48, what you get is Ezekiel's vision of the millennial temple, where you get all the dimensions of the entire temple complex and all those stuff and all those numbers, right? And this is about a literal 4th temple, which will exist during the millennial kingdom following the destruction of a future 3rd temple that will be desecrated by the Antichrist.
And I think it's important to pause there and just add that little note here. So again, I think it's important for us to bang this point home. So obviously I think it's very obvious there has to be a third temple built for the Antichrist to stand in to make his abomination of desolation. I think some people are saying that we don't need a third temple. There's no third temple. We are the temple, and that's true. We are the temple of the Holy Spirit. But I really think that the Bible is very literal when it says, he's going to stand in the holy place and declare himself God and so on. So that's going to be happening, and also there's this fourth temple that Samuel's talking about. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And this fourth temple is going to stand during the millennial reign, right? Okay. So where do I get the date 573 BC? The date is given in Ezekiel chapter 40, verse 1. There you can see how I got to that date. All right, cool. Exactly. Fast forward 1260 years, then we get to the Dome of the Rock. Now, what was in 688? As I mentioned before, this was the commencement year of the dome. Okay, the Dome of the Rock is a type for the abomination of desolation, which will be set up in the middle of the week. Daniel's 70th week, by the way. Right? So this is obviously not the actual abomination of desolation. It's more like a type and shadow, if you will. Sorry, 1 second.
I should also add while he's doing that, I think this third temple that they're talking about building, I think is a super great clue to our timing of our departure. I don't know if we're going to actually see the temple built or not. I don't think it's essential for us to see the temple. I've got the assumption, or maybe they'll have an altar, or they'll have some sort of a daily sacrifice. But I think this third temple that's about to be built is a really good clue and indication of our timing of our departure as well.
Yeah, I agree. I agree on that. Okay. All right, so now when we fast forward another 1260 years, then we of course get to the day everybody knows about, right? AD 1948. Nothing new. AD 1948 was of course the rebirth of the nation of Israel. Now, of course, as we know, this is also a parallel for Abraham, right? Because we know from the other chart that Abraham was born in 1948 since Adam. Now be careful. When I say that Abraham was born in 1948, then I'm obviously not talking about AD or BC. I'm not talking about the Gregorian calendar. I'm talking about 1948 since Adam, right? Since creation, basically.
So really 1,948 years since Adam.
Absolutely, yes.
That's right.
And 2023 years since Adam, he entered Canaan. Okay. Okay, so that's clear. Okay. And now here's the other thing. In Daniel 12 verses 11 through 12, we get two other numbers, and that is 1290 years and 1335 years. Now I know that a lot of people have very different opinions where exactly to place those numbers during Daniel's 70th week. I mean, some would put it on day 1 and go all the way to the middle. Some people would place the 1290 day count at the end and go backwards. I mean, it varies much, but to my best understanding, to my best biblical understanding, both counts begin at the midpoint of Daniel's 70th week. That's how I understand it. Okay. So where does the 1290 year count lead? That leads to AD 1978. What's so special about 1978? That was the Camp David Accords. So what's just as a repetition what that was again? Okay. the Camp. All right, the Camp David Accords. The Camp David Accords were a pair of political agreements signed by Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin on 1978. Okay, but basically what this was, it was a framework for the conclusion of a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. Okay, so this was a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. So you may find that significant or you may find it not so much significant. Doesn't really matter, it's just for fun. Okay. Now what happens when we add 1335 years to the midpoint? Well, then that gets us to 2023.
Yeah, and I think I like that number right down there. Because okay, you've got it written right there, Daniel 12:12. I'll read that verse. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. But you go your way to the end, for you shall rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of days. So that's basically, well, it's the second last verse in Daniel. But I think that's really interesting how if we add that to our year, it gets us to 2023.
Absolutely. And notice they are called blessed because the millennial reign begins 1,335 days after the midpoint, right?
Yeah.
It's always this question, when does the millennial reign exactly begin? It's important to understand the millennial reign doesn't begin immediately after the second coming. The millennial reign begins 75 days after the second coming, right? 75 days after the second coming are also at the same time 1335 days after the midpoint, right?
Yeah. And so I think now my strongest speculation, and this is just me, this is not Samuel, but my strongest speculation is if we were to get raptured in 2023, my guess is that the trip would start in October, with a peace covenant, the covenant with many, and then Jesus would come back on Day of Atonement 2030, and then there'd be a 75-day gap between that, and then the millennial reign would kick off on Hanukkah. And so that's my strongest guess as of whatever day this is right now. But I guess I'm guessing and speculating, but that would kind of line up with this whole timeline that Samuel's got in terms of the parallel with the year and the days kind of thing, if that makes any sense. And I think Samuel would agree. I don't want you to agree if you don't want to, but I think you would agree that Day of Atonement plus 75 days to Hanukkah would be a good ending point in any given year for the end of trib. Is that right, Samuel?
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Yes, I do find it very fascinating that between the Day of Atonement and Hanukkah, which is on Kislev 25, just so happens to be 75 days, right? And I find it very interesting that between 1948 and 2023, just so happens to be 75 years, which is Abraham's age when he entered the Promised Land. So there might be a parallel, a typology. Maybe this was on purpose, maybe this was just coincidence. I don't know. I mean, you decide if this is just a coincidence or if this was on purpose. You decide.
And I'd like to believe there's going to be a big gap between the rapture and the trib. So if the trib starts in October, I really do believe we can fly like now, and it would all make sense. They would need enough time to get things in place. In fact, you might need even more than a couple months. But I think it's really, really safe to say that we could fly 6 months ahead of the trib, or 9 months, or a year, or whatever. So anyway, sort of derail you, Samuel.
All right, cool. All right, so, and by the way, every day is explained here in the green box, so you can also read for yourself if you want. Okay, so what happened in AD 1023? So what happened exactly 1,000 years into the past in AD 23? The original dome collapsed in AD 1015 and was rebuilt in AD 1023. The dome is the world's oldest surviving work of Islamic architecture. So notice the reopening of the Dome of the Rock was exactly 1,000 years earlier in 1023. Now, some might find that significant, others maybe less, but yeah, I found that very interesting.
That is neat. Kind of almost a rededication, almost.
Yes,
Yeah.
something like a rededication, absolutely.
Interesting.
We go here to the Dome of the Rock. Uh, yeah, it says somewhere here on the Wikipedia page that the reopening was in 1023 AD. But yeah, you can also study for yourself.
Hmm.
Okay. Let's just go. All right, let's continue. Okay. With our next date, AD 1658. AD 1658 is exactly 365 years before 2023. All right, the period from the birth of the 12th patriarch Arpexad, 1658 Anno Mundi, to Abraham's migration to the Promised Land, 2023 Anno Mundi, is 365 years, mirroring Enoch's lifespan. Arpachshad was the first post-flood birth. So for all those who don't get where I get that number 1658, I got it from here. Yeah, here. In the year 1658 since creation, Arpachshad was born. Arpachshad was the 12th patriarch since creation. Okay. He was, and notice this, Arpachshad was born just 2 years after the flood. Right? So he's the first post-flood birth. And now here comes the fascinating part. Between the birth of Arpachshad in 1658 and Abraham entering the Promised Land in 2023 is a gap of exactly 365 years.
And that's the age of Enoch.
Absolutely. That
Mhm.
is the age of Enoch when he got raptured. Because as we all know, Enoch was raptured at the age of 365, which is also very significant, since the solar year has the length of 365 days. Okay, cool. Then the next day, AD 1953. What happened in AD 1953? What happened in 1953 was the coronation of Elizabeth II. Now, we all, of course, find it very fascinating that Queen Elizabeth's reign took precisely 70 years, right?
Hmm.
Although she did become a queen in 1952, her coronation was a year later in 1953.
Hmm.
On June the 2nd, 1953, at Westminster Abbey in London. And now here comes the million-dollar question. Who gets coronated in 2023?
The king.
The king, yes. King Charles.
Hmm.
Between Elizabeth's coronation and King Charles' coronation just so happens to be exactly 70 years,
Hmm.
which I find pretty neat. But yeah, take it for what it's worth.
Yeah. Yeah,
Cool, okay.
pretty cool. I mean, I think this is really great because yeah, we're just tying in some biblical history with and making parallels to the day accounts. I mean, some of these things is world history, but I do think it's important. Like, there are some things like I don't want to call anybody out, but some people are really making some ridiculous rapture date predictions on nothing. They're adding 1335 days to you know
To some random event.
some yeah, completely random event and then coming up with a rapture day with, okay, we're gonna get rapture January 11th because I counted 1335 days from when my kid had a hockey game or something. Like, whoa, what are you doing that for? And the thing is, we're all so desperate to get out of here that people will be like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna watch with you because everybody just wants to get raptured. So, but it's important for us to have some type of biblical groundwork to come up with a date. I am guilty of getting excited. You can't blame anybody for getting excited and trying to figure out the rapture, but I think as a rapture community, we want to strike a good balance between getting excited and having some biblical reason to get excited. But anyway,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I also noticed the same thing with the Watchmen. They connect these prophetic numbers with like the most random stuff ever, and you're like, how is that significant?
right.
But here we want to make this as biblically as possible and make a biblical parallel, if you will. Okay.
Yeah. So I appreciate this chart. Pretty well rounded here, so that's good.
All right, cool. All right, so that was the first chart. Let's move on to page 2. This also has a ton of stuff, as you can see. So we have a few day counts, first of all. And the first day count begins in 444 BC, Nisan 1. Now you might be asking yourself, what happened in 444 BC? What happened in 444 BC was the following. The issuance of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem was made in the month of Nisan in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes. Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 1. This event marks the beginning of the 69 weeks. And as we know, 69 weeks are equal to 483 prophetic years, and 483 prophetic years are equal to 173,880 days. All right, so for everyone who still doesn't get what I mean. Okay. All right, so we have 69 weeks, right, between the command to restore Jerusalem and the coming of the Messiah on the triumphal entry in Nisan 10. Okay. 69 weeks are how many years? All right, so times 7. Yeah. 483 prophetic years. But now here comes the important part. These are not 483 solar years. These are 483 prophetic years, right? We know that because the last 7 years, Daniel's 70th week, is also made out of prophetic years, right? So we need to stay consistent in prophecy. The entire thing is prophetic. All right, so times 360. Boom. 173,880 days is the length of 69 weeks. Okay. So where does that get us? That gets us to 8033 Nisan 10. And Nisan 10 was the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Okay. Now for those who still don't get how the 70-week prophecy works, I have a better chart down here. Yeah, here. Okay, you can make a screenshot, if you will, from this image. Right? First you have the 7 weeks plus 62 weeks equals 69 weeks. You can also do it like this, 49 years plus 434 years equals 483 years. Okay, now 483 multiplied by 360 days, because remember these are prophetic years, not solar years, equal 173,880 days. And down here you can see the timeline. 444 BC plus 173,880 days gets you to March 30th, AD 33. Palm Sunday. And by the way, the triumphal entry is also known as Palm Sunday. So when I speak about the triumphal entry, I basically mean Palm Sunday. Okay. So now a lot of you might be asking, why 444 BC? Because I know a lot of people are saying that the 70-week prophecy began in 457 BC. So how come suddenly 444 BC? Well, the reason is because there's a lot of confusion concerning the correct starting point of the 70 weeks prophecy. And that's exactly why I made this chart here, as you can see. Right? So we need to be extremely careful about what the prophecy says. So what does the prophecy in Daniel 9:25 say? From the issuance of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, the city. Okay? That's where the 70 weeks prophecy begins. So many ambiguities and misinterpretations of the 70-week prophecy begin by not recognizing the correct starting point of the 70 weeks. Yet the text is clear. The 70 weeks start with the going out of the word to rebuild Jerusalem. The going out of the word to build Jerusalem obviously refers to the royal decree of the Persian king Artaxerxes that allowed the Jews to rebuild their city Jerusalem. When reading the corresponding biblical texts, we must distinguish between different decrees. Now, what is the most popular decree a lot of people choose? That is decree which is in Ezra chapter 7, verse 7. That is the 7th year of King Artaxerxes in 457 BC. All right. So what was this decree about? The emphasis was on the temple, not the city, right? This is important. The emphasis was just on the temple and the sacrificial service, not the city. It was specifically about funding the sacrificial service in the temple. All the people of Israel and their priests, Levites, singers, gatekeepers, and temple servants were allowed to go home. Ezra the priest, a skilled scribe, had to explore whether everything in Judah conforms to the law of his God, right? That was his mission. His mission was to beautify the house of God and restore the sacrificial service. Now, the first thing we notice in Ezra chapter 7 is that there is not a single word about rebuilding Jerusalem, right? So what is the conclusion? The decree in Ezra 7 says nothing whatsoever about rebuilding Jerusalem. Therefore, this decree does not match with what the prophecy says. This decree says nothing about the construction of the city. This is not without significance, because it meant that this decree was without much political relevance. A city without walls was not a real military threat, right? So we have to pay close attention to what the prophecy says. So obviously we can't take this decree here.
And I was just going to say, I didn't realize this app that I'm using, the recording will stop in about 2 minutes. So why don't we stop here and I can start a new recording? How about that? And we can make a part 2 of this series.
Did the recording just stop after 2 minutes?
No, it's going to stop in 2 minutes.
Ah, okay. All right. We can make a part 2. Sure. Okay.
Okay, so we'll end it here and we'll continue on with this thought on the next one. Sound good?
All right. Sounds cool.
Okay.